My name is Dr. Andreas Boettcher, and I'm a men's health and longevity expert that specializes in how we can redefine how we can age, how we can live, and how we can perform. Not only about extending longevity, but extending health span in the process. My education and my background started in chiropractic, but soon quickly became through functional medicine, through my own health journey and reversing my own autoimmune condition, overcoming low testosterone, even emergency back surgery, to now be in the best shape and health of my life, even at the age of 55. Interestingly enough, when I finished chiropractic school and being over $100,000 in debt and then opening up my practice, another $100,000, I was applying for a routine life insurance exam for the business loan that I needed to build my practice, and I failed. And when the results came in, it was discovered that I had microscopic hematuria, which is non-visible blood in the urine. And quickly realized that the very first thing that comes into mind as a differential diagnosis is cancer. And here I was, 30 years of age, starting a new family, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, thinking, okay, now what? And fortunately and unfortunately, it was discovered through a kidney biopsy that I actually had an autoimmune condition. And this condition is called IgA nephropathy, and where my body produces too much of an immunoglobulin IgA, which is a very large cell that can actually clog up the tiny filters in the kidney and lead to renal failure. So after that wake-up call, I realized that things that I was doing was not right. Doctors immediately wanted to put me on a medication, an ACE inhibitor of all things, and if you know what that is, it's a blood pressure medication that has been shown, off-label to help with managing inflammation. And, I distinctly remember looking my doctor in the eye and telling them, you know what? Thank you, but no thanks. Let me get back to doing what I just finished spending years studying. Because when I looked at my lifestyle, it was anything but what I had studied. I was spending time on the golf course, I was drinking beers during rounds, having hot dogs, eating ice cream every night. I was 30 pounds heavier than I am even now at my age, and I said, I need to start reversing some of the root causes behind the systemic inflammation that was actually inside my body. And it was getting control of a hormone called insulin. It was getting control of inflammation in my body. And so through a combination of diet, lifestyle, training, losing the excess body fat, which is very dangerous tissue. Everybody just thinks body fat is just an inconvenient, unsightly expression of maybe not taking care of our health. But body fat is actually metabolically active tissue. It can aromatize and turn testosterone into estrogen, for example. It also can release cytokines, inflammatory cytokines, which can lead to chronic inflammation. And it also, for every pound of body fat that you have, you're increasing 6 miles of blood vessels, for example. And so that adds up, it's cumulative. That creates tremendous strain on the heart and the overall system. So I took a holistic overall approach. It wasn't just this one pinpointed thing that I did. It's this X equals Y formula that, in my opinion, I think Big Pharma has falsely taught us. They've taught us that you just take a pill for this ill, and without addressing root causes. And so it's usually the sum of small efforts repeated every single day that yield the result that so many people want. And the very first step that I work with all my clients and that I took with myself is I had to take personal responsibility for my health. And until I was willing to do that, I was always going to be a victim of something else. Was it genetics? Was it something else? That was an irrelevant question. It was the wrong question to ask. What could I control? What could I change? And what could I manipulate? And so what I did is that as I mentioned, I lost the weight. I got back in shape. I got control of my diet. I used whole foods. I started using high-dose omega-3 fatty acids to counter the inflammation in my body. My ratios were far off that were leading to a cascade of different problems, and getting control of insulin using vitamin E, a very particular form, tocotrienols, which helps reduce with oxidative stress, getting control of free radicals and supporting mitochondrial health. And fast forward to today, and obviously these results came much quicker because this has been now, I'm 55 now, and this was back when I was 30. So for 25 years, I haven't been peeing blood anymore. And I run my labs every 6 months. And last I checked my renal markers and biomarkers, they should outlive me, which is the end goal. If you look at all of the different chronic diseases that are out there, I try to simplify health. And to me, health really is quite simple. It's not as complicated as it's been made out to be. A lot of marketers have found clever ways to package different things to sell you new different programs and different products and different courses and different supplements. But I try to whittle it all down to really basically 3 elements. And it really comes down to 1, insulin resistance, and then chronic low-grade inflammation, and excess body fat. And so when you look at addressing those 3 things, you're addressing so many components that lead to many of the chronic diseases, whether it's metabolic syndrome, whether it's type 2 diabetes, whether it's dementia, cardiovascular risk factors, cancer, and the list goes on. And it's those 3 things, if we get those in control, you will start taking control of the vast majority of the issues that most Americans are facing. We know that 80 to 90% of today's chronic disease is a result of lifestyle choices. So one of the first basic things to do is to start, shopping around the outside of the grocery store. It doesn't have to be more complicated. When I look at all of the different diets that are out there today, many of them has become as polarizing as politics. We're all human beings with basically the same DNA. And we all have the basic needs for the basic raw materials and building blocks. B vitamins, antioxidants, minerals, nutrition, proper carbohydrates, proper fats, proper protein. And you need healthy levels of fat. One of the biggest myths out there is that fat is evil. You saw this big trend of low-fat foods. And as a result, we're not getting the saturated fat, the cholesterol, the basic building blocks that we need for all of our hormones, for example. And so this leads to a whole cascade of problems in how we feel, how we function, and the energy and so forth that we have. And so you think about, organic fruits and organic vegetables, and these are just the basic raw materials. And if you focus on a whole food diet and just simply start eliminating anything in a box, anything in a bag that are loaded with seed oils. Seed oils are loaded with pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, for example. It throws out our ratio. We need omega-6. Please don't misunderstand. What we do need, though, is a healthy ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. And the average American will test anywhere from 29 to 1 in their ratio. It's an extremely pro-inflammatory state that creates oxidative stress that releases pro-inflammatory cytokines that can harden androgen receptors where hormones need to bind to yield their benefits and results. Because I work with a lot of men that are even on TRT and they're artificially stimulating their testosterone, as an example. And they're still feeling like crap. They still have brain fog. They still have low energy. They still have low libido because even though they may have artificially increased their number of testosterone, the result is that it can't work because it can't bind to the androgen receptor, which is like a parking spot for hormones. It's blocked. And as a result, you can have all this free-floating testosterone around, but because you've got low-grade inflammation, chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, too much sugar in the blood, the body can still not function properly. And so one of the easiest things that people can do to start influencing their health, and this is easily done in a blood test, and it's notoriously missing from all of the labs, because I review dozens of labs every single week for my clients. And omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is never included in a standard allopathic lab panel. And to me, it's a crime because it is so important. And just to give light of how important it is, having a healthy omega-6 to omega-3 ratio can reduce your risk of all-cause mortality by as high as 70%, particularly cardiovascular events. And it has a strong correlation with cognitive function and cognitive performance and cognitive decline. And what should that ratio be? That ratio should be 3 to 1. What's the solution? Taking a high-quality omega-3 fatty acid over an extended period of time. It takes on average about 120 days to turn that number around. And it's the easiest and one of the biggest levers that you can pull to start feeling and performing better, reducing aches and pains, optimizing hormonal function, the way you think, the way you feel, by simply taking a high-quality omega-3 fatty acid, then retesting your blood again at 120 days and see where that number moves. And so when I found out, when I had this autoimmune issue, I was in that abnormal ratio range. Today, I maintain about that 3-to-1 ratio, which is optimal. And you will feel the difference when you bring that number back in line. And it's one of the first places that we start. One of the things that we'll also look for is toxicity in the body. We all know that there are endocrine disrupting chemicals from BPAs and phthalates and so forth, from plastic and forever chemicals, things in our personal care products and our laundry detergent and our deodorants, putting aluminum. And we're putting them in the most vulnerable places in our skin, underneath our arms, of course, for example. And that gets directly absorbed into the lymphatic system, into the bloodstream, and this can create endocrine disruption and start tanking hormones as well. And in addition to that, you have things like, arsenic and mercury and cadmium and so forth. So using things like chelated minerals and chelation therapy can help remove some of these toxins, and of course eliminating some of these personal care products and start using products, because there's plenty on the market that can actually help you to avoid these things that we are inadvertently or unconsciously loading the gun with and pulling the trigger with by using them on a consistent basis that can affect overall health and performance. So this is one of my personal favorite topics because, when I was 47 years of age, my hormones had tanked. And obviously being a man, we focus a lot on testosterone, but women need testosterone too. But many of the things that I'm about to share will apply to both. And so it's really important to understand because, when I was 47, my testosterone was 216 nanograms per deciliter, chronically low. And I wasn't even necessarily symptomatic at that time, but it was quite shocking. Now, doctors immediately wanted to put me on TRT, and like I did with my autoimmune condition, I looked them politely in the eye and I said, thanks, but no thanks. Now, I will say, is there a time and place to optimizing hormones to use allopathic approaches? There can be. But what I have found in my practice and the work that I do, is that 80% of the cases, that's not necessary. And hormone optimization is incredibly important to how we feel, to how we perform, to how we recover. And what I challenge my clients to do is to start thinking about one question. And that question is what is causing my testosterone tank? Because sure, I can artificially, through the doctors that I work with, we can apply TRT, for example, and they can do, weekly injections. But you have to think for a moment, what am I committing to here? Am I addressing the real cause to why my testosterone had tanked? And I knew that I wasn't addressing those root causes. And it's a very important question because when you start artificial hormone therapy, it's a lifetime commitment. You stay on it long enough, you will become dependent on them. And in the case of a male, they can shrink testicular size. It operates on a negative feedback loop. Because when the body senses, artificial levels of elevated testosterone, the brain, the hypothalamus, stops sending the signal to the pituitary gland, which then lowers FSH and LH secretion, which then tells the testes, hey, you don't need to do your job anymore. You can stop working. You can take the day off. And as a result, you start losing that function naturally and you become permanently dependent. And it's a significant financial cost. Can be anywhere from $100 to $300 a month, and you're taking this now for the rest of your life. And I just ask my clients to just step back for a minute. You can always look at that as a potential option. My challenge to you is, what if we in the next 90, 120 days can start optimizing that on its own? Because there's no more powerful hormone than the hormone that your body can naturally produce. And so we believe in doing the work because it's the work that actually makes you healthy. It's not just the artificial number on a spreadsheet. A lot of guys will say, hey, I'm on TRT and I feel amazing. I feel 20 years younger. And true, that can be the case. But I review these labs and I still see many of the hallmarks of the causes of low testosterone, for example, still present. What are those hallmarks? Insulin resistant, chronic low-grade inflammation, and excess body fat. And the problem then also becomes, if you still carry too much body fat, your body will still aromatize even that elevated level of testosterone and convert it into estrogen. Hence why many men will end up on an aromatase inhibitor, which inhibits the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen, which then leads to another medication that you're now permanently on in addition to the TRT. And so when we start looking at insulin resistance, let's talk about insulin resistance for a moment. It's basically when the body stops responding to the effects of insulin, because every time we eat a sugar, your body secretes insulin. Insulin is then designed to take that excess blood sugar and shuttle it into the cell and to be metabolized for energy. But the problem is with today's standard American diet, it is so heavy in processed carbohydrates, processed sugars. The body just cannot handle this onslaught of constant sugar spikes every single day. And as a result, the insulin becomes less and less effective. The body becomes numb to it. Then what happens next is, because there's so much extra blood sugar floating around, there's two things that really happen. One, the excess blood sugar gets converted into triglycerides. And these triglycerides are nothing but excess fat now floating around in the blood. And one of the ways that we can easily test this is we'll look at triglycerides, for example. We'll look at triglycerides in relation to HDL, quote unquote, the good cholesterol. There's no such thing as good or bad cholesterol. Cholesterol is cholesterol. They're carrier molecules that are very important for shuttling nutrients and fat-soluble nutrients throughout the body because fat and oil and water don't mix. And so cholesterol helps to carry some of the fat-soluble nutrients throughout the blood. When triglycerides are too high in relation to HDL, which I notoriously see incredibly low, to me, that ratio is very important, and cholesterol has been falsely, in my opinion, villainified for a crime that it's not committing. It's the oxidation of cholesterol that leads to the risk factors of cardiovascular events. It's not cholesterol itself. Cholesterol is going in to try to repair the blood vessels due to maybe elevated homocysteine levels. Homocysteine is another inflammatory marker that can increase vascular pressure. That vascular pressure leads to scarring of the arterial wall. Cholesterol goes, wait a minute, we got a 9/11 fire going on down there. We need to go in and repair the blood vessels. And as a result, unfortunately, they can get stuck. And when they get stuck, that leads to the plaque buildup and creates the problem. So it's the oxidation of cholesterol that damages the outer membrane of the cholesterol that causes it to become sticky in the first place. So it brings me back to the inflammation. And so when we have that abnormal ratio of triglycerides to HDL, which should be 1.5 or less. And so for an example, my ratio, my HDL is about 80 to 90 on average when it tests. My triglycerides are very low. They're 38. That's a 0.5 ratio. That's an optimal functional ratio that shows that my body's highly insulin sensitive, which is what we want. My body responds well to insulin. What I often see is a ratio where someone's triglycerides are 140, for example, and their HDL is 40. Okay, now we're looking at a 3.0 ratio, which is well above the 1.5, which shows me that this individual is now showing signs of insulin resistance. Now here's the caveat. If you look at the standard reference range, the reference range will show that triglycerides are okay if they're under 150. And doctors will gloss over it. And I speak to men every single week. They're like, yeah, they told me my triglycerides are fine. That's from a reference range perspective, from an allopathic perspective. And to me, that's dangerous because you have to be very careful when you're looking at blood values of what are you comparing yourself to. And so to me, an optimal triglyceride should be under 100, minimum. Ideally in the 80s, 70s, or even lower. Okay? Lower the better. Period. End of story. And then focusing on how can we increase HDL? How do we increase HDL? A healthy diet, strength training, high-intensity interval training, These are all critical components to help start optimizing our HDL levels. But these are things we tend to blow off as things that we don't need or we don't have time for or pay attention to. And so back to the reference range. Here's the thing about reference ranges. The reference range is nothing more than a collection of data from LabCorp or Quest or any lab testing facility. This reference range is their collection of data of the average American, of all of the blood tests that are being done across the country at any given time. Well, here's the problem. Where is the current state of America's health? Is it moving in the right direction or going in the wrong direction? And we all know that the average health of the average American is not good. And so what you're comparing yourself to is a declining average of declining health. So from a functional medicine standpoint, we have a different value of what optimal health is. So if you want to age well, you want to perform well, we have to not lower the bar on health, but raise the bar on health and start getting back to the fundamentals. And so this is very important to understand when you're looking at lab values, because so many guys come to me and they're like, well, my doctor said my labs look fine. And I'm like, no, they don't. And I can tell you why you're still feeling like crap, because a lot of these guys say, well, my doctor says my labs look good, but I still feel like crap. Well, that's why. And so that's very, very important to understand that. I was just speaking to a gentleman, his testosterone was 315 nanograms per deciliter. He's 39. Doctor's telling him, yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm like, that's such a low standard. We can do better. You know, I mean, he's 16 years younger than I am. And so let's raise the bar on what's possible. And he's very concerned about being on TRT. And this is what our mission is, because you can always still go do that if you've done everything else first. So, which then brings me to the second part about insulin resistance, what happens when you have too much blood sugar flowing through the body. It combines with various proteins in the body and goes through a process called glycation, leading to advanced glycation end products. These basically kind of create like a glaze, and I hate to use the analogy of a donut in this conversation of health and wellness, but it creates like a glaze over cells, in particular the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the ATP powerhouse cell of the body, and this is actually where hormone production occurs. And when you have so much insulin that's floating around and this excess blood sugar, because the insulin can't do the job, it leads to this glycation glossing over the cell, and the mitochondria can't function. And then when you combine that on top, it just becomes this cyclical effect. Another component of insulin resistance that I just thought of is that it will actually elevate cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. Now, we need cortisol. Cortisol is what wakes us up in the morning. It's what gets us going. But when we have chronic levels of stress and elevated levels of cortisol, and combine that with on top of elevated levels of blood sugar, which produces then more cortisol, well, here's the other problem. Cortisol competes with testosterone for cholesterol. Cholesterol is the building block to your hormones. And so as a result, that cortisol will win over, which will then lower testosterone levels. It's just yet another example. So getting control of insulin and blood sugar is absolutely paramount to feeling and performing your best. You know, this is one of my favorite topics, and it is one that is often overlooked, and that is the topic of muscular health. And unfortunately, muscular health gets lumped into the category of athletes, bodybuilders, vanity, six-pack magazine covers. But muscle is so much more than that. And in fact, I would argue is the ultimate fountain of youth. And it is one of the easiest things to get control of, regardless of your genetics, your physical ability, your athletic history. But it is one of the most important, because muscle is what allows us to move. It's what allows us to thrive, particularly as we age. And one of the greatest dangers of not taking care of our muscular health, because the old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it, is true. And starting even in young as the age of 30, You lose about 1 to 3% of your muscle mass every single decade, provided you're not doing something about it. We get busy. I understand. You know, I'm a father. I'm a businessman. I put my own health on the back burner. We sacrifice our health, our fitness for career, family, and success, but it's a sacrifice with a big price. And it doesn't have to be that way. You know, I do with my fitness what I do to show men and women what's possible at any age. We don't have to accept this 1 to 3% decline in muscle mass known as sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is just age-related muscle loss. And I can show men and women how even just with 1 to 2 hours a week, how you can reverse that and actually add muscle with the ultimate ROI, which is feeling and performing at your best. Because muscle is metabolically active tissue. It helps you burn more calories. It helps you create more energy. Muscle helps to increase mitochondrial biogenesis. The mitochondria is the ATP powerhouse cell of the body. This is where hormone production occurs. This is where energy production occurs. Everything starts with the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is now, if we even take it a huge step further, is we're starting to understand the evolution of cancer as more of a metabolic syndrome that really starts with mitochondrial dysfunction. And here's the thing, is that when you look at reducing the risk of all-cause mortality, there are two things that lower the risk of all-cause mortality above anything else. And it's absolutely free. You know, I have a supplement company. I promote supplements for a reason, but I'll be the first one to tell you, you can't out-supplement a bad diet. You can't out-supplement a bad lifestyle. And when you look at what we can do to lower our risk of all-cause mortality, you want to age well, you want to perform well, start moving. And the two things are this. You can lower your risk of all-cause mortality by 5x by just having proper VO2 max cardiovascular conditioning. You can lower your risk of all-cause mortality by another 3x by having proper muscular strength. We're talking functional strength. We're not talking vanity. We're not talking six-packs. We're not talking about looking like, magazine cover. We're talking about grip strength. Just being able to hold things, be able to hold your body weight, being able to squat, functional things as we move. There is no supplement, there's no medication, there is no peptide, there is no pill that comes even close to lowering your risk of all-cause mortality. It's those two factors. And they are free through simple movement, through simple exercise, through a simple protocol, simple training, for the ultimate ROI. Yes, I'm proud of my fitness, but I'm more proud of the fact that I'm 55 and I have an empty medicine cabinet. I'm more proud now that after emergency back surgery, I can still go play golf with my son tomorrow and do it pain-free, because it's about function. And if we're not protecting our muscular health, we're losing it, and now we're prone to falls, accidents, fractures, injuries, which we know are one of the leading causes of death as we age, particularly among women. Then by doing proper strength training, you're also strengthening bone. You're strengthening bone density, you're stimulating osteoblast activity, which are the cells that actually help to produce more bone. People will take calcium all day thinking that's going to help them, but they're forgetting the magnesium on top, which is actually more important, or the vitamin D3, which is even more important than that, to helping optimize health. But they're forgetting just how basic strength training, 2 or 3 times a week, general total body workout. You'll feel better, you'll perform better. But metabolically, muscle helps you burn more calories, right? You have a higher, thermogenic effect of foods, right? Requires more calories to maintain healthy muscle tissue. You will maintain healthier body weight, healthier body composition, which is, to me, far more important than BMI or the number on the scale. It's about having healthy body composition, lowering body fat, which we already talked about is so detrimental to our overall health, our cardiovascular health, our insulin, our inflammation, and so forth. And one of the primary things that people don't realize, the functions of muscle outside of movement and function, is one of its primary purpose is to burn blood sugar. You want to start getting control of your blood sugar, obviously eliminate it, but then also start burning it for fuel. Start teaching it how to optimize. And then you need to have that healthy diet, which kind of brings me back as I think about this, is that, when we have someone with elevated triglycerides, how do you lower it? Well, here's one of the things that shocks people, is that you actually need fat to burn fat. So many times I will put my clients on a diet for the first few weeks to help get control of their blood sugar, to start bringing, and these numbers can change very quickly. My clients can start feeling more energetic, more clear, more focused within days, depending on where their starting point is. A lot of people say, oh, well, lifestyle takes a while, it takes some time. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time. But the ROI is priceless. People are shocked to find out that I can maintain the level of fitness that I do at my age when I only work out 3 to 4 hours a week. That's it for the ultimate ROI. So if there's one thing that I encourage people to start doing, is just start moving. Clean out some of the things that you don't need. Start feeding it what your body does. Stay away from the inside of the grocery store. There's nothing good in the aisles. It's all packaged stuff. It's loaded with seed oils. It's inflammatory. Just do that for 1 week. Go to the gym twice this week. Go for some walks after your meals to help burn some of your blood sugar. You'll start feeling an amazing difference. And then eliminating alcohol. Alcohol is a toxin. I know it's socially popular and many people do it for many different reasons, but it's toxic. There's no place for it when it comes to optimizing health. So if your goal is health and your longevity, try that for just 7 days. I call it the 7-day challenge. Eat a whole food diet. Eat what God intended us to eat. Cut out the alcohol and the sugar. Start moving. You'll be amazed how great you can start feeling. The beauty of strength training is that the body doesn't know whether you're moving a band or you're lifting a concrete block. It just knows it needs to do work. So there's so many different ways that you can challenge it, and depending on someone's starting point, there are great exercises that you can do right in the convenience of your home. Simply just doing standing squats for a period of time, doing some push-ups on your knees. If you can't do push-ups flat on the floor, do push-ups against the wall. Start. Or start at an angle, do push-ups against the bed, where you're just slowly kind of lowering yourself over time to increase that resistance. Bands are a wonderful tool that you can use. They're available in any sporting goods stores. And you can easily, go to YouTube and Google at-home workouts and follow one. Then follow something they can do. Everyone has a different starting point of where that fitness looks for them. If you have access to gym or equipment, I live in Florida and a lot of retirement communities around. Many of them have, gyms and fitness centers that they can go to, and they've got these circuits of stations where you don't have to worry about the free weights or balancing weights or using heavy plates or anything like that. The key is to just start. And you start with an easy rep range that you can maintain. Focus on, being in that 15 to 20 rep range if you're just starting out. You haven't done this for years. And just slowly over time, repeat that routine. And then focus on, okay, how can I do a little bit better? Can I do a few more reps this time? Or how can I increase the resistance just a little bit more to push yourself? The body thrives on hormesis, meaning stress. And, Gary Brecka often talks about aging in a way that I thought was really powerful, and I have to give him credit for this phrase. Aging is nothing more than the aggressive pursuit of comfort. And the more comfortable we try to make things all the time, the more complacent we become, the less we grow. And muscles thrive on constant stimulation. And the more you challenge them, the more you hang on to them, the more that you can build them. And you can build muscle well into your 90s. The evidence is there. Your hormones don't have to tank. Your waistline doesn't have to expand. Your energy doesn't have to decline. So much of this has been described as the new normal for men and women over 40. Oh, yeah. It's just your age. And it's the biggest lie that just turns men and women unknowingly into the perfect avatar for big pharma and big sick care at the highest expense. And if we can just get back to those basics and start with simple exercises. Focus on total body movement, squats, maybe some deadlifts, some push-ups, do some bicep curls, and start with that and start looking at exercise from a different perspective. I talk so much about mindset when it comes to our health, because how we think and feel about our health determines all of our decisions. Our decisions determine our actions, and those actions become habits, and those habits then become results. And so instead of looking at exercise as a punishment for what you ate, I look at exercise and fitness as a celebration of what our amazing bodies can do. Here's what I would really like to drive home. Because we live in a world of incredible amounts of information and resources and tools to better our health. Yet, here's the problem. We're still declining in our health. And the question is, why? And I've spoken all over the world, and I've asked audiences this question. How do you define health? And I get the usual answers. Well, you feel good. You look good, right? I have energy. And you're not wrong. But then I'll follow up the question with this. What's the first symptom of diabetes? What's the first symptom of cancer? What's the first symptom of cardiovascular disease? Many times it's a heart attack for cardiovascular disease, and 50% of the time of that, it's fatal. You know, these diseases are not events. I want to challenge the paradigm of how we think and feel about our most precious asset. Because if you want to age well, and you want to perform well, you have to start thinking differently. Man cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. And that's so true when it comes to our health. So let's expand upon this for just a moment, because if you get what I'm about to share with you, this will be absolutely life-changing. And I'm 100% convinced that everything you seek when it comes to your health and wellness starts with understanding your paradigm. So when we look at health, health is a balance of mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, not merely the absence of disease, symptoms, and infirmity. Yet that's how we base it. Our medical system is built on this system, and we've seen where it's gotten us. It'd be one thing if our current healthcare system was working, but we all know that it's really just sick care. It's just managing symptoms. So what interferes with our body's ability to be healthy? Well, to me, it doesn't matter what the disease is. They are all rooted back into three things: physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Physical, accidents, injuries, trauma, right? Emotional, raising families, financial stress, right? We've got divorce, life events, losing a loved one, right? The list goes on. And then there's chemical stress, pollutions, pesticides, seed oils, in my opinion, medications, okay? And so the plastics, the forever chemicals, all of these things basically start a cascade of dis-ease. If we don't have things in place to manage physical, chemical, and emotional stress, and a lot of times we're doing it to ourselves by our choices. The foods that we eat, the things that we drink, the exercise we choose to blow off, right? That we don't manage these elements properly, the products that we use, we're adding to it. We're loading the gun. So much gets blamed on genetics. But what people don't realize, there's the whole science of epigenetics. To me, we're not a victim of our genetics. Genetics may load the gun, but your habits pull the trigger. And so we can control whether we want to pull that trigger or not. But so many are unknowingly or just ignoring the fact that they're pulling the trigger and then hoping medicine will come in and rescue them. Fix me, doc. Well, we got to step back for a minute and think about our paradigm. And so if we don't have this in place to manage these three things, physical, chemical, emotional stress, it leads to dis-ease in the body, because the body has to lose function first before it can manifest itself into disease, symptoms, or infirmity. Okay? Cancer doesn't happen overnight. Diabetes doesn't happen overnight. Low hormones don't happen overnight. It's a process of decline. They started in many cases years before symptoms. I was discovered, from my own example, when I was peeing blood, that didn't happen overnight. That happened over time. I was 30. I felt fine. I was average health, even though I was 30 pounds heavier. I was living the average American lifestyle, right? And so what then happens, if it's there long enough, it becomes asymptomatic pathology, like in the case where I was peeing blood. I didn't have any symptoms. I felt fine. But here I was peeing blood, maybe had cancer, but this was discovered was an autoimmune condition instead. And so then if that's not long enough, if I had not discovered that, if I had not stayed on top of my labs, which is something that every person needs to stay on top of, because the blood doesn't lie. It doesn't care about your socioeconomic status. It doesn't care about the money in your bank account. It doesn't care about your status, your job, or any of those things. Staying on top of your blood work is paramount if you want to be aging well, because you can start taking proactive approaches and start reversing these things naturally in most cases. And so had I not had that lab work and taken control of my health, I might not be here today, because kidney failure is no joke. I'd either be on dialysis constantly, maybe lucky enough to have had a kidney transplant, maybe, but then I'd be on immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of my life. Thank goodness I was able to do something about it. Because then if it's, that asymptomatic pathology is there long enough, it now becomes pathology. You now have disease. So then the question I ask people is this, continuing on this paradigm for a moment. You run to the doctor, you've now got symptoms, what do they give you? They give you an orange mini bottle of some sort, or an injection. And the question you have to ask yourself is, does that prescription result back in optimal health? And invariably the answer is no. It restores you either to some crummy baseline, artificially turns back your numbers, but you're not cured. And I don't even like the word cure, because I don't even look at the fact that I've been successful with reversing my autoimmune condition as a cure. I'm not cured of it. It's still there. So it's a lifestyle for me. It's a non-negotiable. If I want to age well and be a good father and be there for my clients and be there for my wife and not prematurely become a burden to my family, to live an active retirement, this is a lifestyle. And since we know that that doesn't restore us back to health, right, we're just maintaining this crummy level of baseline, because here's the thing. What do all prescriptions come with? All of them that we don't want. Side effects. And that's why the average American today is on what, like 6 more prescriptions? When we know, because my neighbor is a medical doctor and we have this conversation, and I love him dearly, I said, help me understand something. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, why is it that Big Pharma is the only one that can claim to treat or cure or mitigate disease? He goes, why do you say that? I said, well, here's the question that I have. You and I both know that 80 to 90% of today's chronic disease is lifestyle mediated. So I ask again, how is it that Big Pharma is the only one that can claim to treat or cure or mitigate disease? He goes, I never thought about it that way. Because they've been trained in a certain way. And for my practice, our standard is just different. Because I know the potential within. And I even tell my clients, I'm not your doctor. Your body is its own doctor. I just give your body far more credit to be able to heal and be well on its own than my medical counterparts. And you get to choose where that paradigm is and where you want to play. Because what happens is when you get on a prescription, it's a lifelong sentence. That prescription is another form of chemical stress, which creates more disease, which creates then asymptomatic pathology, creates a new symptom that results in another prescription, and now you're on this revolving door of prescriptions as you age. And I just believe we can all age well without them. Isn't that the goal? To live free of pharmaceutical dependency and free of long-term care facilities and live a healthy, vibrant life? Look, I'm not trying to live forever. I'm not, one of those biohackers who says he's going to live to 120. I could care less about that. For me, it's about the quality of my life. And whatever God has in store for me, I just want to know I fought the good fight so that I don't live with regret. Because in all my years of practice, the biggest regret my senior patients have had is I wish I had taken better care of my health when I had the chance. And for many of those that are watching this, you have that chance. Never lose hope. The body is an amazing, self-healing, self-regulating organism. And if you just start giving it what it needs and stop giving it what it doesn't, you just might be amazed at what can happen. And so to bring this home, that paradigm shift begins with understanding how you manage physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Having the proper outlets, movement, exercise, training, giving the fuel that it needs, the raw materials, the micronutrients, the macronutrients, the building blocks, and then eliminating the stuff that it doesn't. Anything that requires advertising on television, don't buy it. That's not food. They're trying to convince you for a reason. And when we focus on managing physical, chemical, and emotional stress, then the question becomes, if we manage this properly and prevent the entire disease process from happening in the first place, does that restore us back to optimal health? That is a yes. And when you make that paradigm shift and realize that health is nothing more than the seemingly small, insignificant changes in life stacked together over time, compounded over time, that results in the health that people want. It really can be that simple. And there are great tools and great supplements and great products, but the problem that I see, even in the biohacking space, that it's being presented in a way like Big Pharma is. Meaning you have X, you take Y. And it's a little more complicated than that, because if we don't have a good foundation of managing physical, chemical, and emotional stress, many of those modalities will not be able to maximize the benefits that people see. Here we are at an event talking about health, insulin resistance, mitochondrial health, inflammation, and I look out into the audience and I see people drinking sodas. I see people eating chips out of bags, eating cookies, eating desserts, processed foods. And there's a disconnect that needs to be bridged, because many of those modalities will not work until we start mastering that. So you shift your paradigm and how you think about health as more than just how you feel, but a balance of mental, physical, chemical, and emotional stress, and not merely the absence of disease, symptom, and infirmity. That's when the power shifts in your favor. But to do that, it begins by accepting personal responsibility.